When did nursing home families have to install hidden cameras because staff reports of abuse were ignored? The bruise on my father's cheek appeared on a Wednesday in March. I noticed it during my weekly visit to Riverside Manor when I leaned down to hug him and saw the purple discoloration spreading from his cheekbone to his jawline. Dad was 82 with advanced Alzheimer's and couldn't explain what had happened. He just touched his face and winced when I asked about it. I found his nurse, a woman named Beverly who'd worked at Riverside for 15 years. She glanced at Dad's bruise and said he'd fallen getting out of bed 2 nights ago. She showed me an incident report documenting the fall at 11:30 on Monday evening. The report said staff had responded immediately, assessed him for injury, found minor bruising, and monitored him overnight. Everything seemed properly documented, but something felt wrong. Dad had been bedridden for 3 months. His legs were too weak to support his weight. He couldn't get out of bed without mechanical assistance. The incident report claimed he'd tried to stand independently and fallen, but that was impossible given his physical condition. I asked Beverly how a man who couldn't walk had managed to fall out of bed. She said confused patients sometimes tried things beyond their capabilities, and that the staff did their best to prevent falls but couldn't watch everyone every second. Her tone suggested I was being difficult by asking questions. I let it go that day but took photos of the bruise with my phone. Something about Beverly's explanation didn't add up. The next week I visited on a different day hoping to catch the facility at a less prepared moment. Dad had a new bruise on his forearm, dark purple with yellowing edges suggesting it was several days old. This one looked like finger marks. Someone had grabbed him hard enough to leave distinct impressions. I found the charge nurse, a man named Dennis, who'd been there 8 years. He pulled up Dad's chart and showed me another incident report. This one claimed Dad had been agitated during a diaper change, and the aide had needed to restrain him gently to prevent him from falling off the changing table. The bruise was documented as accidental from the restraint. Dennis explained that dementia patients often became combative during personal care, and staff had to use physical management techniques for everyone's safety. Again, the explanation seemed plausible on the surface, but I'd been visiting Dad 3 times a week for the 6 months he'd been at Riverside, and I'd never seen him combative. He was docile, confused, mostly nonverbal. The idea that he'd fought hard enough to require forceful restraint didn't match his behavior. I asked Dennis if I could review the security camera footage from the incident. He said the cameras in resident rooms weren't operational due to privacy concerns, and that hallway cameras had limited angles. There was no footage of the actual incident, just the documentation from staff. I started visiting at random times, early morning before breakfast, late evening after dinner, weekend afternoons. Every visit I documented Dad's condition with photos and notes. Over the next month, I found 3 more bruises in various stages of healing. A mark on his shoulder, scrapes on both knees, a cut above his eyebrow that required butterfly bandages. Each injury had an incident report explaining it as an accidental fall or the result of Dad's confusion. The facility administrator, a woman named Patricia Holbrook, agreed to meet with me after I'd filed my 4th formal complaint. She sat across from her desk in a tastefully decorated office and assured me that resident safety was Riverside's top priority. She said they took all concerns seriously and had reviewed every incident involving my father. According to her investigation, all injuries were properly documented, all staff had followed protocol, and there was no evidence of neglect or abuse. She suggested that families of dementia patients often struggled to accept how physically vulnerable their loved ones became, and that seeing injuries was emotionally difficult, but not necessarily indicative of poor care. Patricia's tone was sympathetic, but firm. She made me feel like an overreacting son rather than someone raising legitimate safety concerns. I contacted the state ombudsman whose office was supposed to investigate nursing home complaints. I filed a detailed report, including photos of Dad's injuries, copies of incident reports, and my concerns about the inconsistencies in the explanations. The ombudsman assigned to our case was named Gerald Stokes. He visited Riverside 2 weeks later and conducted what he called a thorough investigation. He interviewed staff, reviewed documentation, and observed care practices. His report concluded that Riverside Manor was in compliance with all state regulations and that there was insufficient evidence to support allegations of abuse or neglect. Gerald noted that elderly residents with dementia were prone to falls and injuries, that all incidents had been properly documented, and that the facility had appropriate policies in place. He recommended I work with the facility to address my concerns rather than pursuing further investigation. The system had reviewed my complaints and determined they were unfounded. I was supposed to accept that and move on, but I couldn't. The injuries kept appearing, and what happened next changed everything. Full story is linked below or on my channel.